Hello friends! Welcome to another video. If you're new here, my name is Will, this is my channel, and Brie Reads. Today we're going to talk about the books that I read in April and May because I'm a little late on my wrap-up. So before I start talking about the book, I just want to do a little self-promotion. I have self-printed my first longer comic collection. It is queer short stories following these 12 different characters, and they kind of interweave and connect in fun ways. I love lore, I love Easter eggs, and this book is just like filled with them. Stuff and things you can like pick up if you read it, and I really love that. I've been working on it for a long time, and it is self-published, so it's fairly like basic, the printing of it, you know, we can only afford so much, but if you want to get a copy of this or a digital copy of this, you can find it on my Ko-Fi that I will link down below. Now let's get into the books. I will do them in the order that I read them so that I don't miss like anything that I read digitally or listen to audiobook. It's been quite a while since I read these books, so bear with me. But the first one I wanted to talk about is Trash by Sylvia Aguilar-Solani, translated by J.D. Pluckerman from Spanish. This takes place in Mexico, close to this trash dump, and it's about these three women. You follow all their perspectives and how they're kind of related to the trash dump. One of them is a teenage girl. She lives close to the trash dump, and one of them is a scientist who's researching this trash dump, and one of them is a trans woman who's like a matriarchy of this sex worker business. And you follow all three perspectives, and they throughout the story kind of connect, which is like, I love it when that happens. And I was just like turning the pages, waiting for them to connect. How do they connect? And I like kind of figured it out early, I think, but it was still like so lovely when I, like the book finally came to that. It's really interesting, but it's also really dark because of the fates that are connected to trash and the themes around like disposability of humans. They all have such different stories to tell, and they're written also differently, and especially the trans woman who's like the matriarchy of these sex workers. Hers is, it's only written through dialogue, but only what she's saying on the dialogue, so like only half of the dialogue, which took me quite a while to like get into, but I definitely thought it was an interesting choice. I did feel like it was a little slow at times because there's not all that much happening. It's just kind of like following it, enjoying it, watching it unravel. I will say that the translation is not excellent. I think it could have been better, but I also think that it's really nice when like the translator leaves in like some sentences or words or language from like what it's originally written in, because it makes me feel like I'm actually in that place and like reminds me that we're like in Mexico, and I never forgot that. And I think that's part because like certain words or phrases are left in. So like I like that, but I know people are divided on that. So even though it was a little slow at times, the pacing was a little bit odd, the writing fluctuates throughout the story, the translation's a little bit off, I found it to be really interesting, and I ended up giving it like a solid 4 stars. I'm super happy I read this. The next book I picked up was Blue Hunger by Viola Di Grado, translated by Jamie Richards. This is written in Italian, I believe, but it takes place in Shanghai. So it follows this woman who's just lost her twin brother. She just goes to Shanghai to kind of not process his death. And there she starts kind of like hooking up with one of her students because she's an Italian language teacher at this school. They're both adults, but basically I went into this thinking it was gonna be like a horror. I would not classify this as a horror, and I think because I thought it was a horror, I was like disappointed by it, because I think horror takes the story like to that next level, and when you're expecting it to go to that next level and it doesn't, it feels like unfulfilling to read the story. But essentially it just follows these two women as they have like kinky sex and have a very unhealthy relationships. I don't find anything wrong with like what they're doing in their endeavors. They're just doing it for very unhealthy personal motivations, and I think the horror was supposed to be in like the psychological and like a little bit of how their intimacy developed, but I didn't find it all that scary, to be honest, or like I didn't really feel the horror vibes, which is what I wanted from this book. But I did really enjoy it. What's really fun about this is, for me, I spent a lot of summers in Shanghai because my step-siblings and my half-siblings are half Chinese. And my stepmom is from China and Shanghai, and we spent a lot of summers there. And so when we're talking about like the architecture or the environment or the language, like sometimes I could even like, I've been to certain places, you know, and I really enjoyed that, and like it brought me back, and I felt like the environment was so vivid in my mind. In addition to that, like the main character has a lot of reflections about the culture, the buildings, the language, and kind of like weaves in with the emotional turmoil that she's like trying to process about her brother and this new situationship that she's in, and all of those elements, and like were just like put together really nicely. Another thing that I think this book did really well is that it has a very clear narrative without feeling too in your face about the message. Like that balance was very well done. What I will say though, that the book has a very dark perspective on like love and reflections of love. But I mean, it doesn't need to be the author's. It's just like this character who's like obviously going through grief and, you know, coming off of it, having this like not great experience with this relationship. I understand why, you know, the perspective isn't love positive. Also, solid 4-star, just 4-star, I think. I enjoyed it. Solid, but more jarring. I wanted it to be so much more horror, and I was just waiting for the horror to come, and it just never came. Next, I picked up a NetGalley arc I got of the book Wolfpitch, and I want to pronounce the author's name Balázs Lőrincz, but I'm not sure on that. I will put somewhere where when it's published, when it's released, I think it's already out. It is a supernatural, I was gonna say new adult, but I'm not even sure what that means. Like old young adult / early 20s. It follows this werewolf girl who plays guitar, and she's been kicked out of the band. And, oh, this is a graphic novel, by the way, Jesus. Been kicked out of the band, and because she's unlikable and she starts fights, kind of. And then she finds this a legendary musician who is now a ghost because she died, and they kind of start a band together with her rival. It was fun, it was cute, I like the art. I think it's very nice when like comic artists use like a selective selection of colors that just like come together so nicely. It's something I don't know how to do, and I admire when other artists does it, and especially because this ghost, Geraldine, like the musician, she has this like, she has to drink milkshakes to basically stay solid, and she has some like cool magical powers, and it was good. I liked it. I have nothing like extraordinary to say about it. I think that some of the relationship stuff could have been handled better, like in the aftermath of certain drama, like certain conversations could have been had differently. But all in all, like a good read. I want to pick up the previous book that this author has written, also queer. I mean, only one book I read this month was not queer. So unless it's just like, it should be the norm. Unless I say a book is straight, it's probably queer. But this one is gay, lesbian. I liked it. I gave it, I guess I gave it 4.5. Not our new favorite, but it was a good time. It's like a 200-page graphic novel, and I read it in like one sitting. So, next I picked up Gay Warewolf by Tony Santarella. This is a debut, I believe, and I think that it's also going to become a series, which I think is excellent because I used to read these books when I was like a teenager and starting BookTube. It's called the Accidentally Dead series, I believe, and it's about, each book follows like a different magical creatures, but they always have like one or two like overlapping characters. And so the first one follows like a vampire, and then there's like a werewolf, and then there's like, you know, whatever. And then it just like continues with like different supernatural, like classical supernatural creatures, and it's just like a drama story kind of, or like a romance a little bit. Those books were not great, but I love the concept, and I think this series is gonna be the same. So like this one is a werewolf. The next one I think is Banshee, also queer. So very excited for this series because I love this book. I ended up giving it 4.75 stars, which is kind of a surprise, but it's kind of like lighthearted, fun, just like great for getting out of a reading slump, but it's not lighthearted in a way where it lacks substance. There's actually a lot of amazing conversations in this, and I should probably tell you what it's about. So you follow Brian, who his life got kind of ruined when he was turned into a werewolf, and now he's just working this bar job, and his only friends are like two of his co-workers. And every full moon he like transforms, he gets shit drunk, so he doesn't remember what happens when he transforms as a werewolf, and he kind of has injured and killed people before. He's, I would say, verging on alcoholic. And then this guy approaches him and is like, hey, I can help you figure out your little werewolf problem because I'm also a werewolf and I want to help you, you know, embrace the masculine energy of the werewolf. And so he's like, skeptical, but like, okay. And so Brian joins him trying to create this community of werewolves to empower them. And it's sort of like a little bit like toxic masculinity disguised as self-help. It was just really fun. I loved Brian as a character. I liked the two co-workers that are his friends. Like, one of them is also non-binary. Brian, no matter how much he kind of was helped by this man, toxic masculine man, and how much he was being indoctrinated into this, he criticized it internally and was just like, I will take what I want from this, you know, like, even though he made some bad choices, like, his morals were always good and we were always rooting for Brian, which I really enjoyed. Like, he was never really an unlikable character. He just made some like bad choices, and it also has like friendship in it and kind of explores like the corporate and the community aspect and what does that mean. But it's also really fun and lighthearted, and just kind of like such an enjoyable read, and it was just like exactly what I needed when I read it. Right, I wrote a little list. It explores community in different forms, identity, mental health, the corporate class, and so much more. And I'm impressed by how much like such a lighthearted, fun read, page turning by the way, can have so much. Yeah, it was just, if you want something just like easy in between all your other reads. Actually, I was thinking about this, like how a lot of my favorite books, I would not want to be reading only that type of book, you know? Like, it's, you need stuff that, like, in between your other books that's like, my god, me today. You need stuff in between like your favorite types of books to read to like create that contrast. So I wouldn't want to read like only my favorites all the time. That would be exhausting. And also it's nice to read other stuff, but also this is 4.75 stars. I loved it. But you know, it's very different from what my typical favorite books are. But I recommend this one if it sounds like something you'd enjoy. Speaking of werewolves, I picked up the third volume of The Coyote by Ranmaru Sarya. There's only 4 books in the series, and I've been slowly making my way through them. Very underwhelmed by this one. It's also about this like werewolf boy romance, and this one just has like the middle book syndrome. The stakes weren't high enough. A lot of redundant character building, kind of, because we already know how much the characters mean to each other. I don't have a lot to say about it. I wish it ended in like a cliffhanger like the previous books, because I don't feel like very compelled to pick up the last book in the series, but I probably will rather soon so that I can finish the series. I really hope the last book, you know, will pull through. But yeah, this one is like middle book. So not excellent. I gave it 3 stars. It was quite underwhelming. Next, I picked up another arc. I think I will also put somewhere on the screen when it's coming out. This is Medusa of the Roses by Navid Sinaki. Navid Sinaki. This follows Amir, who lives in Tehran in Iran. It starts off with that he's in love with this boy and they've made a plan so they can live together because it's illegal for them to start a life and be openly in love. And so we kind of watch the book unfold, this plot that they've sort of constructed. It's such an interesting read. I don't really want to say more about the book than that, to be honest, because you go through a journey, mostly, I mean, there's a lot that happens. There's so many characters, and it like flashes from scene to scene as this plot kind of unravels, and we don't really know what exactly the plan is, but it sort of goes exactly as planned, ? question mark. And we meet so many different characters and we don't know how much time has passed. You know, and the book feels very elusive and like hard to grasp. But I think in a way it's very intentional with how probably their love and desire feels for each other. Nothing is like sure or secure, and they're not safe in so many ways. And they're also not together through the majority of this book. So we're mostly following Anir as he's struggling with his own wants and desires and analyzing them, but also not as much as I feel like he should. It's just very interesting and it's really beautifully written. Sometimes it had these sentences that was just like, oh my god, this is amazing. And I was highlighting a lot in my ebook that I had. Sorry, I'm looking out a lot because I'm just like thinking, because there's a window behind you. What was I saying? Yeah, because the writing was at some parts just like so good. Like some lines are just like, and then at other parts it felt a little forced. Like this book is kind of a little bit all over the place. And I don't know if this is a debut book, but it reads kind of like that. But I think I just let myself enjoy what it is. And I thought it was spectacular. I gave it a solid 4 stars as well. It has a little bit of an amateur vibe, but also it's really good. And I like that the author didn't try to educate us all that much on the political situation or social situation in Iran. It was just like through context, and I enjoy that. It felt like it wasn't catering to a certain audience or trying to educate. You just were along for the ride, and you know, if you as a reader have to look something up, that's what you do. I enjoy that much more than fiction book that's trying to weave in information, because it feels more authentic, and I really like that. I thought it's harrowing. Parts of it is really difficult, but just like also fascinating, like the situation with how it is with like trans people and gay people, how it's different, and just like culturally, I found it really good. And the relationships, I wish almost the author would have leaned further into dedicating the book, or like niching the book down to the genre a little bit, like what it was trying to do. But I also enjoyed that it was like a little messy and open, you know? And I can't really decide which I'd rather, but this is good and I recommend checking it out when it's released. Next up, I picked up Peach Pit, 16 Stories of Unsavory Women, edited by Molly, I'm gonna say her last name wrong, Molly Llewellyn and Crystal Buckley. This is anthology, let me see if I can, from these people right here, have a story each, and they all center around women doing things that are like questionable, which honestly, I'm not really sure. I thought the women in this book would be more bad. I thought they would be worse, but unsavory doesn't actually mean that bad. I wrote, I felt like they were ranging from mildly questionable actions to relatable. So that was a little bit of a surprise. And I have to say, like, with this collection of authors, like, all of them were well written. All of them had like great language, and the ones that I did like, I liked them because of the plot, the story, the topics that they were exploring, which I think is like a great reflection to have about anthology collection. And I actually found some like new authors that I would love to check out, which I honestly don't feel that a lot when I'm reading anthologies, because I was just like, okay, that's fine. But there were some in here that I really loved. I wrote down which ones that spoke to me. I really loved Maps and Composition and Amaranth. And the ones I also enjoyed, but not as much, were Aquafina, Sick, Manifestation, and Buffalo. The rest didn't leave a lasting impression on me. I'm really glad I got to this, and Molly's also releasing another anthology collection called Be Gay, Do Crime next year, in 1 year, I think, which I'm very excited to pick up, so I'm really glad I finally got to this. I gave it in total also a solid 4-star. It was a very 4-star month all around. Also, this cover is beautiful. Well done. Then I read Coffee Break. All right, next I picked up another arc. This is Compound Fracture by Andrew Joseph White, released this date, I guess. I've only read Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White, which is his debut, I believe. This, just like that one, follows a young trans boy. This is also young adult, just like that one. I don't read a lot of young adult, so I definitely like this book a lot, despite the fact that it was young adult and not because of it. But at the same time, like, having young adult books that are so queer and so educational, it's just, I would have died to read something like this when I was a teenager, you know? So I can't really flaw the book for that. I'm so glad they exist. Why it's just not like my personal favorite. That being said, before I tell you what the book is about, I gave it 4.75 stars. It was really, really good. So this follows Miles, who lives on the countryside somewhere in the US. I don't remember where, but rednecks, think something like that, you know? And he kind of ends up in the middle, in the crossroads of this like 100-year feud that his family has had with this other family. And he kind of ends up like that because the other family's kid beats up Miles. And he lands in the hospital and it's severe and he can't say anything because his assaulter is the son of the police chief. And so this book is raw. Like, it is really, really brutal in so many ways. It made me queasy at times, like how descriptive certain parts are, because it's very graphic, it's very brutal, and I kind of like that it's in young adult. I think there's a rise in like horror young adult type of books. I didn't think anything about this book was surprising, to be honest, like how it was resolved, any type of reveals, even Miles coming to terms with his identity and different things he found out about himself. Like, all of that was very expected. It didn't surprise me at all, and yet I was like reading one page after another, staying up until like 2 a.m. every night, turning pages, or tapping pages technically because I read it digitally, but just like wanting to continue reading because the way Andrew Joseph White writes is just very engaging, and I just still want to see what happens, and it has that like thriller mystery aspect that I still find very engaging, even if I kind of know what's going to happen in many ways. So this was a great read, and I also highly recommend checking it out if it sounds like something you'd be interested in. But yeah, also look up trigger warnings for this one because it's way harsh for being a young adult. So then I picked up another arc. This is out now. It's Breathe, Journeys to Healthy Binding by Maya Kubabe and Dr. Sarah Peitzmeyer. This is a nonfiction that basically tells people how to safely chest bind, starting off with some stories from different people about their experience with binding in different ways, different materials, from different ages. And it was cute, it was informational. It both gave you like exercises to stretch and work out, and also just like healthy tips, some statistics. It's like a lot of different things in a very small, short books, kind of informational and also workbook-like for trans people or people who bind for various reasons. It was good. I kind of wish it would have been more, you know, like expanded upon, like maybe more different stories, more in depth, more reflections, maybe more material that could have been more workbook-like and that people can write in, because it had a little bit of everything, but I kind of would like it to be like expanded in my ideal world. But at the end of the day, this is an excellent resource to have for people who like new to binding, you know. I gave it 4 stars. What I will say though, that this ebook was extremely frustrating to read. If I have a screenshot, I'll put it up here. But the text was separate from the comic. So all the bubbles and everything in the comic was clear, and then it was written in text, and sometimes it was just all mashed up together, and it was the most frustrating arc to read ever. Yeah. So, but I got through it, and I was trying to write a review looking past that format. Next, I finally picked up one of the books that I wanted to read this year. This is Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, by Chu Namju. This has just kind of become a whole movement in South Korea. Like, this book basically inspired I don't remember what the movement's called, but South Korean women to stop interacting and talking with men as a political stance, which I think is super cool. And I can't believe this book is what inspired that whole thing. So this is a deeply feminist book that tells the story of Kim Jiyoung as she grows up, the opportunities she's had and not had, the sexist and misogynistic experiences that has like shaped her life, the judgments on her, the opportunities that are robbed from her, and the way she's expected to behave, and the way harm is inflicted onto her, that are experiences that most women go through, especially in the context of like South Korea specifically. And it was like really difficult to read, not only because it's deeply steeped in reality and provides several footnotes with actual facts and statistical information that is real, but also because it's really hard to read about the things that she goes through, on top of knowing just that how many people go through it, and a lot of them are also like very relatable experiences. Knowing all of that, and the fact that this book is and has been super impactful, and I'm very excited that this book exists, and so many people felt like seen and resonated with this book, and like the impact this has had, which I think is excellent. I'm very happy about that. My reading experience of it, I gave it a 3-star because the tone is very monotone. The plot doesn't have anything that's really exciting about it. It's like you're reading it for like pure rage about, you know, how the character's life has gone, which is like good in itself, but it's not like a reading experience that I particularly enjoyed, just because the language was bland to me. The story didn't engage me by itself. It was more about the discussions the story incited. So I gave it 3 stars. It was just fine. I'm very happy I read it, but not my type of book that I usually enjoy. Next up, I picked up Girlfriends. Let me switch side. Let's do something exciting. This is Girlfriends by Emily Sue, published by Little Puss Press, which is cute. This is a short story collection following mostly trans women, kind of in the same vein as Casey Platt, if you've read her books. I've only read one Casey Platt book, which is A Safe Girl to Love, and I wasn't a huge fan of that book, but I think if you were a huge fan of that book, like, you're also probably gonna like this one. It mostly follows these different women or people who go to parties, hang out with their friends, deal with relationship problems. It's supposed to be kind of like a Gen Z view. I wanted it to be either like more Gen Z references or related, or more of like a generational reflection, which I don't think it really provided. It was quite timeless in my opinion. Maybe some of the relationships are kind of formed by Gen Z behaviors, but not really more than that. I really wish the book went more in depth on these characters, on the reflections of the main characters and their relationships, because it feels rather shallow, to be honest. The writing in itself is really, really good, and that's kind of like what kept me going throughout the story. It just flows, and it's just really enjoyable to read for the writing. It doesn't do anything extraordinary, but it just feels what's the word? Effortless, maybe, but in just like a very good way. I really enjoy the writing, and I especially comparing it to like the books I read close to reading this book. Like, its writing's really good, but it just lacked so much depth to me. Like, it felt boring, and I kept asking myself, like, why do you want to tell these stories? Like, I didn't feel like I got anything out of them. Like, I don't know what conversations I would feel called to think about from reading this. So it just felt really bland to me, other than that, which is very unfortunate. I gave it 2.75 stars. Probably the worst read of the month, to be honest. We have 3 more books to talk about. I promised myself I'd do a quicker wrap up this time, but hey, this is 2 months of reading. I didn't read all that much. So Girlfriends and the next 3 books are the only books that I read in May. So, because I've been very busy with stuff and things, because I'm opening my own queer bookstore in Copenhagen, it's been taking up a lot of time. So, not much reading. Next, I picked up Rainbow Black by Maggie Thrash. Oh, the pages are all crumbled. This was such a good book. I was really excited that I found like LGBTQIA plus thriller mystery type of book because I've been wanting to read more of these. This is a fairly new release, I believe, and you follow Lacey, who grows up with these like hippie parents. It starts off in like the late 80s, early 90s, where the family is impacted by the satanic panic hysteria that kind of goes on, and her parents get handcuffed and accused for something that completely alters the rest of her life. And what ensues is kind of a mystery about what is going to happen. And the mystery element of the book is just kind of Lacey in the future telling you like, something's gonna happen, you know? And there's no real mystery in the plot itself. It's just the story structure that makes it feel like a mystery. And thriller-wise, I would describe it more as like court thriller, or, you know, she has to go to all these court proceedings, and just her fate, the way her life transpires after this. It's actually like really difficult to read about, and for much of the book you don't really know what the truth is, but you're just there with Lacey experiencing how her family is just like hit by this, and the people around her and the city she lives in, and how culturally it's dealt with and legally it's dealt with. It's really, really fascinating. And then the majority of the book kind of follows her life as it unravels after that. Oh my god, also how her queerness affects all of this that's going on. It's just really, really fascinating to read about. A really engaging read. Through most of it, I was just like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? Part of it is also a love story, which I also just like really love that part, and how it kind of bloomed out of nowhere. That was really, really lovely. Like, Lacey is just such a complex character. It's truly like a character study in so many ways, how they're all so complex. Everyone in this book, it's just so many layers to all the characters that you can analyze. My least favorite part of the book was kind of when we jump to 2005 and you see sort of Lacey now. And what happens then, it felt like it slowed down a little bit. Also because Lacey is now an adult, you know, and I don't think, I gave it 4.25 stars. I was so ready to just like rave about this book endlessly, and I did really, really enjoy it. It was really fascinating and so fun to read, and also difficult to read at times. It's a lot of violence at times and tough circumstances for so many humans in this book. But I just don't think it quite had like the end impact that I wanted. Like, when I finished the book, I wanted to be left with more feelings and more things to think about. But the book touches on so many things, and it's a little bit scattered in the themes and the purpose of the book. But there was just so much in here, and I recommend it. It was a really great read and a great reading experience. And I'm definitely gonna pick up more by this author. Now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, I want to know more about these characters. But yeah, I recommend this. Then I picked up Love the World or Get Killed Trying by Alvina Chamberlain. There's a lot of fun stuff about this book, and the reason why I picked it up. I thought it was a memoir, but actually it's autofiction, which I learned at the end. So I thought this was like 100% Alvina's life, but it's just very inspired by her own life. Mildly fictitious is what I'm thinking, because the main character is Alvina. It tells about actual things that happen in her life. So we follow Alvina. She travels to Iceland, to Berlin, to Paris, as she's searching for love, for the man of her dreams. This book, also because Alvina, the author, is half Swedish, half American, so she weaves in some sort of like Swedish language bits, and she's written, all her previous books I think are written in Swedish, which is also really fun, and my partner's Icelandic, so I've been to Iceland, and that's also why I wanted to read this book, because I think the setting was just something that you know, I could relate to. And also, Alvina's trans, if that isn't a given already. Wow, this is just a very interesting book. Alvina's mind is super chaotic and she's so intelligent, and she wants this cis straight man to love her, not anyone specific, but she just wants to be loved. And she is struggling with like the trauma of being like assaulted in her past and kind of hating men, but also feeling like she needs their love. And it's her like just going back and forth on all these feelings and her identity. And it's very chaotic in many ways. And you couldn't really tell from like looking at this book, but I would recommend this book to people who liked The Fifth Wound, because in many ways they have a very similar energy to them. They're written kind of differently in many ways. This one feels easier to consume, but the way it is so intelligent and sometimes goes back to more humor, and then it goes back to these very like poetic, amazing sentences and political reflection. They both have this intense trans woman narrative, very intense characters and people, and I think I relate to Alvina in so many ways because I just feel a lot. And sometimes it's like difficult to even like embody yourself no matter what is happening around you, because everything, the internal world is so intense, let alone when you're like trans and been going through so many things and struggling, you know? And throughout this book, I'm like, why are you dating these men? Or like, why do you want this? And like, not to say that, you know, all trans men are heavenly little angels, but I wanted her to connect with the trans community, and maybe she'd find a trans man that she could be with that, you know, wouldn't treat her in this stereotypical trans way, where we view trans women as, or men view trans women as either something to be fetishized or to be respected, but not something they would be attracted to. It was just very interesting. I loved it a lot. I gave it 4.75 stars. So a lot of like really good reads this month. Lastly, before I say goodbye, God, I'm talking for way too long. I just wanted to mention that I finally finished the audiobook for Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow by Gabriella 7. I started listening to this as the audiobook together with my partner when we were painting this room, and we just don't have a lot of moments where we can, you know, sit down and listen to an audiobook together or something. So it's been spread out on like 3 different parts. We finally finished it. My opinion of it was definitely colored by the fact that we listened to it so spread out. I thought it was fine. I understand why a lot of people like it. I love that it focused on friendship. It was fun, the gaming element of it, how games and culture and relationships change over time. Just a very easy, enjoyable listen. So I understand why people like it. I thought it was very enjoyable. I gave it 3.75 stars. Maybe I would have given it higher if I would have listened to it or read it closer together. So out of the physical books I read this month, this is kind of, I guess-ish how I would rate them in order. Everything here and up, just absolutely amazing experiences, amazing reading experiences. I read so many good books. No 5 stars, but it's also because I've decided to reserve that, you know, last 1.25 star to like absolute favorites. So a 4.75, you know, is amazing. It's basically a 5 star in my book. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about these books. Let me know if you read any of these, if you're interested in reading any of these, what other great books you have read lately. I hope you have a brilliant, amazing day. Go and check out my comic book collection on Ko-Fi. I also have some tiny scenes if you just want like a taste teaser. Yeah. I will talk to all of you soon. Bye bye. Have a good day. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Mwah.